Shabbat Shalom. So I know it is a little stereotypical to have the question, but if you are suddenly transported to the middle of wilderness, what are your priorities? Food? Shelter so the bears don't eat you alive. It's much better for them to eat you dead. Fire again. We really want the fire. The 6 essentials. Do you have one of the 6 to share that hasn't been mentioned yet? Water. Excellent. And yes? A flashlight, if you're lucky enough to have one. Otherwise, they're unlikely to be growing on the trees. Looking for a new hand? Yes. Snacks. We'll put that under the food category, but snacks are a very special type of food, dear to my heart and my waistline. First aid. You have to make sure that you're in good shape. Who knows how you ended up transported to the middle of the wilderness? Never mind. Okay, so let's just make sure we've got the list here. We need, well, first aid to make sure that we're all in good shape. We need shelter. We need fire. We need water. And we need food. And depending upon the circumstances, roughly in that order. Well, now we are in the middle of the wilderness. Bamidbar, in the middle of the wilderness of Sinai, we have left from Egypt. How are we doing on our list? At this point in the Torah portion, we have reached Mount Sinai. Do we have water? Yes, we do. Absolutely by this point. You may remember that there was a very famous incident with Moses throwing a piece of wood into the water, which turned it sweet. And then after that, he struck a rock, which created water that flowed. And indeed, throughout our time through the wilderness, we had a well that was always with our camp. Water, check, absolutely taken care of. Do we have food? Yes. Absolutely. What form does our food come in? Manna. Right? Wonderful, tasty manna that appears each and every day. You go out, you collect, you eat. Everything couldn't be better. We've got plenty of food. No problem there. Do we have fire? Do we have fire? There is literally a pillar of fire that is guiding us through our journey. We've got fire aplenty. No problem on the fire front. Absolutely great. First aid, of course, we can take care of ourselves. Do we have shelter? Really? What are we living in this traveling? What was that word? Sukkot. I know we always picture everybody in tents because that's what it always looks like in the various animated versions. But Sukkot, the little booths that we build for the holiday of Sukkot, for Sukkot, the sukkah itself, that is a recreation of the kinds of temporary huts that were made by our ancestors. Nowadays, if you're into the scouting, bushcraft, wilderness kind of things, you might make a lean-to or other types of shelters. It's the same basic idea. Sukkah is a little bit easier to stand up in, though. So we had those. And yet, here in Parashat Terumah, God tells us to build a big tent. It's very strange. Because after all, if we were going down our list of priorities, the shelter should have happened a while ago. And of course, we now have just reminded ourselves that we already had shelter. So why is God telling us to build an enormous fancy tent months into our journey? Seems like it's a bit of a strange ask at this point in the travels. Any ideas? Because this tent is not going to be where we sleep. This tent has a fancy name. It's the Mishkan or the Ohel Moed. Some argument on exactly how to put those titles to it. But this Mishkan is not for napping. This Mishkan is for very important things. Now, the Ten Commandments, indeed, the tablets of the covenant are going to go into that, but they're going to go into a very special box. Yes? Yep. And that special box is going to have the Ten Commandments, and around it is going to be the tent. In front of that is going to be the menorah, the beautiful seven-branch candelabra, and there will be an incense, and outside that there will be an altar, and outside that there will be another screened-off courtyard, and all of that together will be the centerpiece for our worship, the centerpiece for the sacrifices and all the other activities that are about to be commanded in the book of Leviticus, of Vayikra. Why? If we don't need it, we're not eating it, we're not drinking it, we're not burning it, we're not sleeping in it, we're in the middle of the wilderness, why are we building this, quite honestly, luxury item when we've got so many more important things that we need to take care of, right? To have faith in God. Do we not have faith already? God took us out of Egypt. I mean, what exactly is a fancy tent going to do that the exodus out of Egypt couldn't have done? And if not the exodus out of Egypt, standing at the foot of Har Sinai, of Mount Sinai, and experiencing the miracle of divine revelation, as fancy as the tent is, come on, it's not going to blow that out of the water, is it? Any other ideas? Well, I'll give you a hint. It's not for God. God's not having us build the Mishkan for God. I know that sounds kind of strange. I mean, after all, we've got our places to sleep. We've got our food. We've got our water. We've got everything we need. So clearly, we're doing this for God, right? Because he's the one who doesn't have a house. He's the one who doesn't have anything to eat. So we can shovel in the sacrifices as though we were feeding God. No. We had to build the Mishkan last. You'll notice we took care of all of our human needs very first, because if you're not alive and comfortable, it's very hard to see past tomorrow, let alone into the future. We took care of all of those needs, but now there is a very important need that is beyond just staying alive, and that is staying together. The Mishkan wasn't built so that God would have a house or that God would have food. The Mishkan wasn't built so that we would just have a place to worship because, oh, isn't worship fun? All of that was constructed and instructed so that we would become us, rather than a series of individuals who just so happen to be walking in the same direction away from Egypt and anywhere and towards anywhere else. We would be reminded that we were a nation, that we were a people, united through our connection to Adonai, to God, and that we would have as a symbol for ourselves there in the middle of our camp every single day and for hundreds of years afterwards, something that we built that showed that we were us. The Mishkan was a creation that God gave us the opportunity to partner in creating. And it was through that creation, as we describe throughout this Torah portion of Terumah, that we reinforce the togetherness of the Jewish people. That we didn't become fragmented just into tribes, into clans, into families, or into individuals, but that we would unite all of those disparate elements, bind them together in not only this amazing project, but the central role that it would play within our community life. The community was forged through this creative activity, this joint venture. And anybody here who's ever been in a scouting camp or event or any other type of event that knows what it is like to pitch together, to work together, to each do one small part of a larger task, and to then see what has been made by that collective group endeavor, I think you can understand what I'm talking about. To stand back and look and say, well, I did that, and everyone else did the rest, and my piece was essential, and their piece was essential, and this is what we do when we work together. To have that feeling and to recognize it as something that will last, like I said, for centuries, and a place that will be used time and time again, and that will travel with us. Not left behind at the foot of Mount Sinai, but when we travel, pulled down, folded up, and carried to the next place. And each place we erect it, we remind ourselves, this is who we are. And on for centuries to come. The Mishkan is part of that list of shelter and fire and water and food, a list of all of our needs in the wilderness, reminding us that, yes, once we've had those immediate needs taken care of, we have the need of the community, the need of the being together. We were not meant to stand alone. We were not meant to feel alone. And by uniting in the creation of this Mishkan, we are never alone. Shabbat Shalom.